Welcome to Coffee and Donuts. I'm Frank Magaha. If you don't know who I am, I'm a former federal law enforcement officer that's now a full-time law enforcement instructor. I'm one of the very few in the entire world who's ever been able to honor grad the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I have to say, though, the reason I do this is because none of my accomplishments are my own. I've had great mentors and guidance throughout my career that's really allowed me to excel, and that's what I want to do for you. So, Coffee and Donuts is opened up to all my coaching members, but the first segments of it is me answering public comments and public questions so that I can give back to you, just like what was done during my career. Let's jump into it. All right. Welcome to another Coffee and Donuts. Glad to see everyone rotating in. We're going to jump right into this. I have some pre-submitted questions as always. If you have questions that you want to get to, make sure you either raise your hand later on once we open it up or start typing them in the chat. If you want to ask them privately, send them over to me privately in the chat. Let's see here. All right. Let me pull up our first one. First submitted question we had was, I have a question. Let's say you get furloughed at a job, but you are still an employee. For my work history, should I put the last date I technically clocked in or the full date I was an employee? Also, what if I generally don't have the dates I worked? Many of the past companies have issued digital W-2s that I can no longer access. Okay, couple things with this one. There's, how do I want to say this? With this specific question, there's a couple issues. One, you should always be keeping your W-2s, right? Whether law enforcement or not. It's just that you're going to need them. You're going to need them moving forward in society, right? Whether it's for banks, it's for loans or mortgages, whatever. Always keep your W-2s. Always keep your tax returns too. The big thing with this one is, what is your termination date going to say? That's where I would go with this one. Is your termination date going to say that it was from the date of furlough? And are we talking furlough as in you just weren't receiving compensation, but you weren't receiving salary, but you were receiving benefits, compensation benefits such as healthcare and things like that? If you weren't receiving anything and then they furloughed you and then ultimately you were later terminated due to the furlough, right? There's ways to be terminated that aren't necessarily negative. Then I would say I would put the date that you were furloughed and I would just articulate that, right? The big thing about this is explaining that you weren't terminated due to poor performance or some type of past issue, right? Or some type of issue at work is what I'm getting at. As for dates, I would go onto the Social Security Administration. I've said this multiple times. Go onto Social Security Administration, create an account. Don't lose your login ID and password. You're going to need that later in life. And go in and look at the dates that you were technically gainfully employed. Now, with this one, it might be a little bit different because Social Security Administration is going to see the times that you pay taxes to the Social Security Administration. Your FICA, your Medicare, Medicaid, whatever. So that would give you at least those dates, and then you can articulate your way from there. Once again, you don't have to be perfect, right? We're not shooting for perfection here. What we're shooting for is being able to reasonably articulate why something occurred or what the situation is with this specific incident, hurdle, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter. But that's where I would go with that one. Is I really wouldn't worry too much about the furloughed versus when you were an employee. You could just put the furlough date and then explain the furlough date if you can't get the specifics. But there's still a chance you can get the specifics. So test that out. All right, next one. Had my background interview about 6 weeks ago for this said department, and they said it would take at least a month to hear back from them. How long should I wait to follow up? Well, the first answer to that is definitely at least a month, right? You wouldn't follow up prior to the department saying, hey, did you complete XYZ, right? Or you wouldn't follow up asking the department if they completed anything. You would just follow up in a professional email being inquisitive if they need anything additional from you. We have the templates already pre-made, but that's the whole purpose behind them is to focus police candidates in making sure that they're not coming across as, hey, you told me that my background could be done in a month. What's my status on that? That sounds horrendous. Don't ever say that to a background investigator, right? You're just going to make them angry, right? You can reach out more professionally and with something along the lines, depending on the criteria, right? This won't fit them all, but something along the lines of, this is Frank Magaha. I applied during this hiring cycle. I'm just following up to see if you need any additional information from me, right? And then they'll let you know at that point in time whether or not, hey, at this point in time, no, we don't need any additional information, or hopefully they'll let slip out a little bit more. No, I'm wrapping up your stuff now, or I'm reaching out to your references now, and hopefully that will spark a conversation for them to at least say something back to you. And at that point in time, you can kind of use the conversation to gain more information. But yeah, if they say to wait 6 weeks, then you wait 6 weeks. Now, that's usually the standard that we say for being ghosted anyway. You should not follow up with a department unless you haven't heard from them from 4 to 6 weeks. Always. Don't pester them unless they tell you to check in weekly, right? There's always a specific. But yeah, you want to be very cautious of that one, of not beating them down. There's a lot more to add to that, but we could go into it would take the entire session here. So we'll move on to the next one. Okay, this is another deep one that we can dive into. Do people working on your background ask for your passwords for your social media accounts? Yes. Not all departments do that, but some definitely do. They'll ask for your login information and password, especially if all your accounts are private. But once again, not every department will do that. They'll just see what's publicly accessible. We've even seen it where some departments are now using systems where they'll plug in your cell phone, right, your digital device, to the system that does a complete scrub of it, looking for anything that might be less than professional, certain images, certain text phrases, anything along those lines that they can scrub the data or even pull the data off and review later through a different system. So be prepared to give over your social media. That's why we spend all the time in the preparation phase to make sure your social media demonstrates who you are now as a professional, not who you were maybe 10, 20 years ago as a teenager, and you're, doing some less than kosher things, whether that's underage drinking or even just using, a derogatory hand symbol, anything that just doesn't portray you as a professional. These are the major things that you really need to look at. And if you don't evaluate them in the preparation phase, you should definitely be evaluating them while you're in the hiring process, right? So even if you said, Frank, I'm already in the hiring process, I don't care about my social media, I've already made it past. Well, that's great. What happens if you make it to the poly or the psych and you get DQ'd and you have to start all over? Well, that one department might not have cared about your social media presence, but the next one might, right? Might be the first thing. Or that one, you don't even know it, but they were giving you the benefit of the doubt there, saying, every candidate this cycle has had some type of social media issue, let's not even worry about it. Let's just move on with our candidates. You don't know, right? And trying to say that, oh, I got through it with one department, so I'll get through it with another. That's usually the biggest fallacy I always see from candidates, where they just said, oh, I made it to the board interview with this department, so I'm going to be able to make it to the board interview with the next department. Or better yet, hey, I made it past the background, which we all know is never true unless you get hired. I made it past the background with ABC Police Department, so I know I'll at least make it past the background with the XYZ Police Department. No, they're not the same, right? Don't treat every individual agency as them being the same in every type of capacity. Won't work. It's not ideal, and it's sure to actually backfire on you. Okay. All right. That's what I got for pre-submitted questions for you all. I'm trying to open it up and give everyone some more time. Hey, before I let you go, I did want to ask real quick, if you enjoy this, know that we go in and we answer all the questions on YouTube. And then if you have any enjoyment from the podcast, from the audio podcast, no matter where you're watching it, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other platforms, please leave us a review and like and share it. That's how we get out there, and then that shows me that this is the content that you all want to see, and then it's actually being beneficial. So if you have a comment and you want to ask a quick question, you can ask it over on YouTube. We try to answer all of them for as long as we can, as well as any of the extra gifts that we have for you. But additionally, you can go on to our website. It's Armogan CT, so ARMOGANCT.com. And up there we have live free trainings that we do as well occasionally. And you can keep checking there and see if that's something that you want to jump onto. I hope this all helps you. As I said before, stay safe and I'll see you next time.